Welcome back to Bourbon Hunter, the channel where we chase great bottles, break down bourbon myths, and occasionally make some questionable life choices, all in the name of whiskey research. Here, we're diving into the stories behind the bottles, the trends shaking up the bourbon world, and the pours that'll make you say, yep, that's going on the top shelf. So grab a glass, settle in, and let's hunt some flavor, because around here, the bourbon's bold, the chokes are bad, and the hunt is always on. Behind every great bourbon is a story. And over the last decade, a new chapter was written, the rise of craft bourbon. And look, if you've ever tried to find a good bottle on a Saturday morning in America, you know we're all part of that story now. The craft bourbon movement didn't appear out of thin air. It started taking shape in the early 2000s when a handful of small, determined distillers began doing something pretty radical for the first time, making bourbon outside the shadow of Kentucky's giants. One of the first was Tut Hill Town Spirits in New York, founded in 2003. Their Hudson Baby bourbon became a national phenomenon and proved that great American whiskey could come from unexpected places. Around the same time, Willet, after decades of silence, fired up their stills again in 2003, helping reintroduce the idea of boutique family-driven bourbon. In 2004, Stranahan's in Colorado arrived, showing the world that mountain states could produce whiskey with serious character. By the late 2000s, more pioneers followed. Woodinville Whiskey Company in Washington, Dry Fly Distilling, Corsair with their wild experimental style, Balcones in Texas, and Colville in Chicago, each bringing new regional styles and bold innovation. These early distilleries weren't massive operations. They were small teams, limited budgets, and a whole lot of stubborn determination. But their success opened the door for the craft bourbon explosion that came in the 2010s. Without these early 2000 pioneers, the modern craft bourbon world simply wouldn't exist. These folks mortgaged everything. Meanwhile, I can't even commit to buying the full-size bottle of perfume at the mall. So what actually makes a bourbon craft? Craft bourbon isn't just a fancy label or a smaller building. It's a philosophy. What makes a bourbon truly craft comes down to three things: control, creativity, and connection. First, control. Craft distillers handle nearly every part of the process themselves, from choosing local grain to picking the yeast strain, fermentation time, barrel char, and exactly where those barrels sit while they age. Nothing is outsourced. Nothing is mass produced. These distillers know every batch like it's one of their kids, except it behaves better. Meanwhile, I don't even make decisions that carefully when picking out which fast food place I'm going to. Second, creativity. Big heritage distilleries stick to tradition, and they're incredible at it. But craft distillers, they experiment like they're trying to break into Hogwarts. Heirloom corn, chocolate malt, rye grown down the road, wild yeast, smaller barrels, weird finishes, toasted, charred, recharred, maybe even talked to nicely during a full moon. Craft bourbon is where the rules bend and the new flavors are born. Third, connection. Craft distilleries operate on a human scale. The folks making the bourbon are hands-on every day, tasting barrels, signing bottles, talking to visitors, and telling the story behind each batch. When you buy craft bourbon, you're not just buying whiskey. You're buying the personality and passion of the people who made it. So craft isn't about being tiny. It's about being intentional. It's bourbon made with hands, not committees, with originality, not repetition, and with a direct line between the distiller's vision and what you taste in the glass. And because it's personal, you can taste the personality. Some craft bourbons taste calm and refined. Some taste like the distiller had a full-blown midlife crisis at 3 a.m. Either way, I respect the hustle. Early pioneers like Willett, Peerless, and New Riff showed everyone how it's done. These guys were doing craft before craft was cool, like hipsters, but with better haircuts and way better whiskey. Willett revived a heritage distillery in the early 2000s, proving that even old school names could make small batch, hands-on bourbon again without losing their edge. Kentucky Peerless resurrected a brand that had been asleep since Prohibition, basically bringing back from the dead and showing the authenticity still matters. And that ghosts apparently make great bash bills. New Riff, a brand new distillery with a modern voice and a traditional heart, proved that craft bourbon wasn't just nostalgia. It could shake things up while still respecting the barrels. Together, these three became the early champions of craft bourbon. Small batch rebels making big flavors one barrel at a time. Basically, they're the rock stars of whiskey, and we're just lucky enough to follow along. Then the out-of-state wave hit. Distilleries outside of Kentucky started proving that they could play in the big leagues too. Texas brought bold, high heat bourbons. Colorado offered mountain born, rugged flavors. New York experimented with unique grains and local twists. These places were saying, hey, Kentucky, scoot over, we're coming in. And guess what? Turns out bourbon can't come from anywhere with American oak and someone stubborn enough to babysit a fermenter at 2 a.m. Texas, Colorado, New York. In Texas, distilleries like Garrison Brothers Distillery, with their flagship Garrison Brothers small batch bourbon, and Balcones Distilling helped show that hill country, or really anywhere with heat, oak, and grit, can make bourbon that stands tall. In Colorado, there was Stranahan's Distillery with Stranahan's Colorado Whiskey, one of the first legal, modern micro distilleries in the state, showing Mountain State whiskey could carry weight. And later, places like Distillery 291, with their 291 Colorado bourbon and related whiskeys, added to the proof that Colorado could hang with the bourbon heartland, even if its altitude messed the barrels a little. In New York, distilleries shook up the rules, showing bourbon didn't have to wear a Kentucky badge to be legit. For example, Hudson Baby Bourbon and other offerings from Tut Hill Town Spirits proved local grain, small batch whiskey could find real fans up north. And guess what? It worked. Whiskey lovers started paying attention. Then came the bourbon boom. Suddenly, everybody wanted authenticity, which is ironic because most of us drink bourbon to forget we have responsibilities. People didn't just want whiskey. They wanted bottles with a face, a story, a soul. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to find something that isn't behind glass or in the please don't ask about this bottle section of the shop. Social media and online whiskey communities changed the game. Facebook groups, Instagram posts, whiskey blogs, these took small distilleries from who are you to sold out faster than my kids can lose my phone charger. And let's be honest, small batch bourbon offered something the big guys couldn't: personality and experimentation. Wild yeast strains, unique grain bills, double oaked barrels, crazy finishes. Craft bourbon became the playground for flavor seekers. By the time the big distilleries noticed, it was too late to ignore it. Suddenly, even the heritage giants were releasing small batch, experimental, or limited editions, proving that the success of craft bourbon didn't just create competition, it changed the whole industry. In short, people wanted authenticity, flavor, and a story. Social media helped small distillers reach the right audience. And whiskey lovers, well, we're more than ready to drink it all. As craft bourbon became the playground of the whiskey world with new grains, wild yeast, and weird finishes, it was like someone opened a candy store and said, yes, and put whiskey in it. Somebody out there has definitely tried aging bourbon in a barrel made from reclaimed flooring and good intentions. Others are experimenting with heirloom corn, chocolate malt, or rye grown 50 miles away. Some distillers are double oaking, triple oaking, probably even whispering sweet nothings to the barrels at 3 a.m. When tradition stops at the end of the sidewalk, craft distillers say, cool, let's go out into the woods. And in the woods, they invent bourbon flavors the big guys wouldn't dare touch. Small batches with crazy mash bills, unusual yeast, funky barrel finishes, and mash variations that read like a mad scientist's grocery list. This is why craft bourbon became the ultimate laboratory for flavor. It's bold, it's experimental, and the best part, when it works, we get to taste it. And when it doesn't, well, we're still drinking bourbon, so it's a win in my book. And the big distilleries noticed. Craft didn't just create competition, it lit a fire under them. Suddenly, the giants realized people weren't just buying bourbon for a label on the shelf anymore. They wanted personality, story, and flavor, and if the small guys could deliver it, the big guys needed to step up. Now the heritage brands were dropping limited editions faster than I dropped New Year resolutions. Single barrels, small batch experiments, mash bill variations. It's like they're trying to be the cool kids in high school all over again. Craft bourbon didn't just make the market more competitive, it forced the old guard to innovate. They started taking risks they never would have, released experimental series, playing with barrel finishes, and even teasing flavors that make us go, wait, they actually did that? So yeah, the small distilleries might have been tiny, but their influence, massive. Craft bourbon didn't just join the bourbon world, it changed it, and the big distilleries are still catching up. The future of craft bourbon isn't about size, it's about storytelling. Distilleries aren't just making whiskey, they're sharing history, personality, and sometimes weird experiments all in a bottle. Expect more sustainable distilling, locally sourced grains, energy-efficient operations, and smaller footprints. Look for regional styles. Bourbon doesn't have to be confined to Kentucky anymore. And yes, there will be collaborations that make no sense on paper, but taste incredible. 2 distilleries, different styles, 1 barrel. Somehow it works. Craft isn't niche anymore. It's the heartbeat of bourbon today. And if you're hunting, well, good luck. Because if there's one thing craft distilleries love, it's making a bottle so limited that I need Google Maps just to find a store that carried it once. But hey, that's part of the fun. Now, don't get me wrong, not all bourbon is craft. In fact, most of it isn't. The big distilleries are still out there, churning out millions of gallons a year like whiskey factories on caffeine. These guys focus on scale, consistency, and brand recognition. Every barrel is blended to taste exactly like the last, which is great if you like knowing exactly what you're getting, but it doesn't exactly scream personality. Some big names: Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, Buffalo Trace, Wild Turkey, all producing fantastic bourbon, just not in the small batch, hands on, mad scientist style that defines craft. Think of it like this: big distilleries are the Michelin star chains of bourbon. Craft distilleries are the pop up food trucks where the chef experiments with chocolate ghost peppers and maybe a little bourbon in the salsa. One's consistent, the other's a thrill ride, and sometimes a little dangerous. So here's the takeaway: craft bourbon isn't better, it's different. Small batches, wild experiments, and bottles with personality. And whether you're chasing limited editions or just enjoying the giants, bourbon has never been more exciting or more delicious. Bottom line, if you're hunting bourbon, remember, the big guys are steady, the craft guys are wild, and you, my friend, get to sip it all. And that's another pour down. If you enjoyed hanging out in the hunt today, don't leave me standing here like an empty bottle on a Sunday morning. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment about what I should track down next. Remember, bourbon may age gracefully, but my YouTube channel only grows if you feed it. I'll see you in the next hunt. Cheers, bourbon hunters.